All right, welcome everyone. I've got 2:45 Pacific, so we're gonna kick this off. Just to make sure you're in the right place. You're here for the finances, forming a 501c3 for your camp for fun and nonprofits. So we're gonna spend just a minute or two waiting to make sure we get folks in here. We had some other panels that ran a little long. So give us just another minute or two and we will kick this off. Okay, welcome everybody. I am Sandor. I am a volunteer with Camp Support. I am also the founder and president of Burner Network, which is a Burner 501c3. I have created two other Burner 501c3s, and I am keen and eager to get other people to do the same thing. We've got some co-pilots here on this panel. The first person I want to mention is Muse. Muse, if you might unmute, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, hi everybody. I'm Muse and I'm with Vines Without Borders. We're a wine lounge in the 430 sector. We do wine tastings every day, and along with some wine education and some art projects. In the default world, I am a board certified personal injury trial attorney here in the state of Texas. I work with arts organizations, museums, theaters, entities like that, helping them manage risks. So basically, when somebody takes that Varipole and they put a gigantic speaker on the top of it and it falls over and hits somebody or something, I'm the person they call. So, and then my other big thing is I'm an urban beekeeper. So there you go.
Wow. Well, and I would be remiss without saying, this is how great your volunteers are. Muse joined us directly from the emergency room where she had cut herself today, but still made it to this panel like a champion. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, safety third. What can I say?
Safety third. Kevin, tell us a little bit about you.
Safety third is a lifestyle. I love it. Hi, everyone. My name is Kevin Blake. I'm the lead for ID8. We're a 10-year-old camp that most of us know us as a green theme camp. We're going to be in the 730 sector this year. And most of us know us as a green theme camp because of our beloved compost program, which we're returning again this year, expanding, growing due to popular demand, but also a unified mission to address climate change. So we're a camp, a community, and a nonprofit organization. We like to say we operate at the intersection of environmentalism, art, and well, let's just stop there. Then the intersection between art and the environment. And I'm also leader in the Green Theme Camp community, helped create that a couple of years ago. And personally, in my background in the default world, I currently work in cannabis and plant medicine, but I have a background in business and management consulting. Yeah, excited to be here. When I'm not planning for Burning Man and which is all of our free time right now. I'm out in the outdoors with my rescue dog, Willie Nelson, finding hiking trails and other adventures with him. So,
awesome.
Great
Well,
to be here.
and just to reiterate, so ID8 is a California 501c3 nonprofit, correct?
Correct.
And then Burner Network, which is the one that I manage, is a Texas nonprofit corporation. So we're getting multiple states here in the mix so people can see how those work across state. D-Rex, do you want to unmute and tell us a little bit about you as well? D-Rex is our chat and tech mod. She'll be taking your questions. If you have questions for us, just type those in the chat. But D-Rex, tell us a little bit about you.
Hello, everybody. I've been camping, going to Burning Man since 2016. Right now, I volunteer for Camp Support at Burner Network, and we help also with, we have a Camp in Araya program where we give grants to camps. So I will say, if you guys need money, shoot us an email, apply.
Yeah. So D-Rex is also an officer and a director with Burner Network. And so she has been diving into the 501c3 world as well. Let me go down one slide here. Just want to quickly hit these guidelines for our breakouts. These are pretty standard for all Burning Man breakouts. One, please mute your mic if you're not a panelist. If you have a question, please type it into chat. We're going to leave 15 minutes at the end for sure, hard 15 minutes to make sure that we're getting your questions answered. Please be respectful. Please be present. Please speak from your own experience. And we are super excited that you're here and that you're interested in this topic. This is going to be a little bit different of a breakout in that you're going to get a pretty in-depth presentation and some how-tos. And then we're going to be weaving in the panelists as we go on some very specific topics that really hit their expertise. The first thing that we want to talk about after we've done these introductions is just a disclaimer. We're going to be talking about a lot of legal, accounting, and tax stuff in this, and just keep in mind that Muse is a professional, but she's not here as a professional. The rest of us are not trying to sell you or provide you with professional advice. This is all just for informational purposes only. Your mileage may vary. All right, 501c3 nonprofits, they're so boring. Why should you care? Why are you in this breakout? Let's all try and stay awake. Well, do you like free building materials? So this is here in the city of Houston called the Building Materials Reuse Warehouse. If you are a 501c3, you can get unlimited free lumber, steel, wiring, lighting, whatever is dropped off at this sort of community warehouse, you can go and pick it up for free. You can see you need to be a nonprofit to do it. How about vodka? Do you like vodka? Tito's Vodka will give 501c3s donations of vodka for their event, but you have to be a 501c3. How about not paying sales tax? Sales tax in Houston here is 8.25%. I have no idea how much it is in California, but I would guess it's pretty high.
More.
How great would it be not to pay sales tax ever? How about getting 0.5% of every dollar your friends and family spend at Amazon? Amazon Smile is a program that does just that. And it works exactly like Amazon. Instead of going to Amazon.com, you go to smile.amazon.com. And you do all the things you normally do, and you collect money from that. How about donations made to your camp being tax deductible? So anytime you go to your members and say, hey, look, we're going to do this thing. Can folks give us some money? And you say, well, look, when you do that, you can, on your itemized 1040, you can take that as a deduction. How about getting those donations then matched by their employers? This is ExxonMobil. To the degree you want to take money from ExxonMobil, they matched $30 million of their employees' giving last year to 501c3s. You have to be a 501c3. What about art programs in your community? So this is, again, in Houston. Again, that's where I'm from, so it's one area I'm most familiar with. The city, using hotel taxes, funds a bunch of grant programs for arts organizations. The first one you see up here, it's $2,500. That's for a variety of stuff that's digital. But the two down at the bottom are the really exciting ones. One, if you throw a festival or a mini burn, let's say, you can get up to $10,000 from the city. And then if you are a 501c3 organization, you can get up to $125,000 they have a couple of different categories, and up to $1 million for a really big 501c3 that you can use to fund whatever you're going to fund for the public that's in line with your mission. And then finally, how about every dollar that you take in to your camp being exempt from federal income tax? Now, wait, what? Would that mean that your camp's income is taxable? Taxable to whom? Yes, it's taxable to you. If you have a camp that doesn't have an entity, doesn't have an LLC, doesn't have a nonprofit corporation, doesn't have something in between you and that money, it is taxable by the IRS as ordinary income with no deductions for expenses. You have to have some kind of business that money comes into for you to be able to claim those deductions. And that will bring us to our first poll. I want to ask you guys, how are you organized? let us know. All right, so it looks like everyone has generally answered. Let's see if I can display these results. Look at that. 10 of 18 of you that responded have nothing for an entity for your camp. That means you got to be super, super, super careful. Now, odds are you are not going to get audited, but if you do get audited and you've not set this up properly, and let's say you took in $100,000 over 5 years or 3 years or whatever it was, they can charge you taxes with penalties and interest. So that is one of my big missions as a volunteer in this community, is helping people understand that and showing you some very, very easy ways that you can protect yourself and avoid that. I'm going to stop sharing this poll and let's go to the next slide. So those are sort of monetary oriented, tax oriented things with 501c3s. Let's talk about liability, because these 501c3s help you with that as well. So Lisa, I'm going to toss this, Muse, I'm going to toss this over to you. I think you've had a chance to look at this. Stop me if you haven't. And do you want to just walk us through a little bit of the Christina story and kind of what the danger is here as our resident personal injury attorney?
Yeah. So many of you hopefully have seen or ridden on the Christina as it has floated gracefully about the playa. And there are, if you have ever gotten on it, there are warning signs when you get on: beware, be careful, danger. But in this instance, a camper from the very camp that Christina came from was on that yacht sailing around the playa and managed to fall off and be very substantially injured. And you would think, well, this is a camper, he's one of us, no problem. But the injuries were really quite severe. And ultimately, the Christina was fortunately insured, but they were sued. The drivers were sued. A number of individuals within the camp were sued because of those personal injuries that individual sustained when they fell off of the boat, right? So Christina did a lot right. They had warning signs up, and they had insurance. So ultimately, in all likelihood, insurance will handle most of this. But as a camp organizer, all of us could end up being sued if there were some sort of an injury or a problem at our camp. And there's quite a few places where that could happen if you think about it. So you're going to move your stuff to the playa. We'll say you have a car accident getting there. Who's going to get sued for that? Is it just going to be the driver, or is it going to be your camp? When you're setting up, what if somebody falls off a ladder, creating your wonderful shade structure? If there's a significant injury, who's going to be responsible for that? Say you take your magnificent art car out on the playa, and somebody falls off, or you hit something and damage someone else's property, or someone gets truly hurt. Who's going to get sued for that? Is it going to be the camp? Is it going to, are you just going to say, well, you're at Burning Man, you should have known better. There's a great liability waiver on the ticket for Burning Man. That doesn't necessarily extend all the way to you, the camp, right? That's just to the Burning Man organization. So you have a tremendous amount of risk, which we all have to deal with coming to the playa. And one of the ways that we manage that is with a 501c3, and by creating a corporate entity. And what that corporate entity will do is allow you to shift some of that liability to the corporation, and then away from you, the individual who is running the camp or who is owning that art car. So what can happen then is, instead of you, Joe Smith, being sued because you own this art car, suddenly your corporation, Joe Smith 501c3 corporation, is the entity that's going to be sued. Not that you want to be sued, and we want to believe that no one would ever sue, but the reality is when there's very significant injuries, it does happen. It's not uncommon. So your corporation is really going to help you with this. And it's going to help you in a couple of ways. One, you can shift the liability to the corporation. In other words, it's the corporation's fault, not yours personally. The corporation is going to have a much easier time getting insurance for whatever you're doing than you might individually. And if worse comes to worse, it's the corporation that can be taken down in the event of a large loss, rather than somebody or sheriff taking a judge, or a court in a courtroom, really taking a judgment against you, and then in turn someone coming to take your personal assets to pay that judgment, or being asked to pay that person's medical bills. So that's what a 501c3 can kind of do for you. It does one other thing I think that's also worth talking about, and that is it creates transparency of ownership. So you're going to put all of the assets that you have for your camp, as you're going to title them or name this as property of the corporation and not an individual. Because what happens, so-and-so found your camp, it changes, it changes to a new leader, there's the torch is passed. Well, who owns that camp infrastructure? Is it the individual who founded the camp? Is it the camp? Or is it the new TCO of the camp? But if you put it into and titled it in the name of the 501c3, it's absolutely clear who owns that property, right? And so it stays with the camp. So that's really what it's going to do for you in terms of overall helping you manage your risk, reducing your personal liability, moving it to the corporation, helping you get insurance, and helping you identify what your ownership interest is.
Thank you, Lisa. That's fantastic. And the really kind of key point here with 501c3s that make them even different, or 501c3 nonprofits that make them even different from like an LLC, is that nobody owns those assets or owns the 501c3 nonprofit. The entity owns the asset, but then nobody owns the 501c3 nonprofit. It's basically held in the public's trust. So hopefully we have now made a somewhat convincing argument that 501c3s are cool and that might be useful for you to have one. So how do you go about forming one of these? So there are 9 easy steps to forming a 501c3 nonprofit without a lawyer. Sorry, Muse. People think of these a lot of times as just being overwhelmingly difficult. You got to go pay someone $5,000, $10,000 to do one of these. And what we're here to tell you today, the good news is that the IRS and the states have made these unbelievably easy and cheap to set up. And it just takes a little bit of elbow grease. You're going to see 9 steps here. I'm just going to quickly hit those. The first thing you got to do is you got to find 2 other people. So you now have 3 trustworthy burners, and you're going to do this together as a project. You need to pick a cool name. Make sure that it's available in your state. There's usually a Secretary of State or someone that you can check with. You just go to their website and look up your name. You're going to use templates. You're not going to have to create them. You're not going to buy them from an attorney. You're going to use templates to write your articles of incorporation, your bylaws. You're going to hold an organizational board meeting with minutes, and then you're going to sign a registered agent consent form. All of these things, if you just Google your state and then nonprofit and then template, you'll find example after example after example. And I'll go through in a second. There's really only one thing you have to really remember when you do those things, but using a template for these is totally fine. The next thing you're doing is you're going to create a nonprofit corporation online in your state where it's most active, and you're going to pay a small fee. It's like $25 in Texas. And they're going to have everything's online. You just fill out a few little categories, a few little boxes. It's mostly like who you are and, just a very brief description of what you're trying to do. Once you've done that, you're going to go to the IRS, again, online, and you're going to ask for an employee identification number. It's basically a social security number for your business. You're going to take that when you get it, and you'll get it instantly from the website. You're going to open a bank account, and you're going to stick enough money in it to pay your 275 501c3 application fee and avoid monthly bank fees. At Chase, you got to have $2,000 in your account. So when I opened Burner Network, I put $2,275 in that account. Once you've done that, you're going to go online again. You're going to file a form 1023 easy with the IRS. Now, this is where people maybe aren't super familiar that this has gotten super, super simple. The IRS is really bifurcated between really big nonprofits and the nonprofits that sort of 50,000 and less in revenue. And if you have one of those, all of the forms are extremely simple. They're very, very quick. They don't ask for a lot of information. And then yearly, when you need to file like a tax return, it's literally a postcard. And it just says, are you still under $50,000? You say, yes. And you send it in and you're done. After you get that 501c3, that's all you need in most states to go back and say, hey, look, Texas, hey, look, California, wherever you are, Nevada, we don't want to pay state income taxes anymore because we're a 501c3. They have you fill out a form and then that's okay. And then finally, you have something like this. This is the notebook that I keep for Burner Network. And it's just got tabs for all this sort of stuff that we just talked about. And, you know, when I did all of this for the first time, it might've taken me 2 hours. When I did the most recent one for Burner Network, I punched it all out in under an hour, just because you understand what you need to do. It's really quick. It's really easy. And you do all that, and you nonprofit. Next slide. What about cost? Some people are like, oh, I don't want to do this. It's $6,000 or it's $10,000. It's very expensive if you use an attorney. But if you spend a little bit of time sort of thinking through this, it can be quite cheap. So in Texas, $300, Nevada, $325, California, $325 all in. There's an article of incorporation filing fee. There is a statement of information fees, particular to California. And then the IRS charges you $275 to go for your 501c3 exemption. One thing you might have heard us talking about is the state and the 501c3. One thing to understand is that 501c3 is just federal. It's just a federal exemption. It sits on top of an entity that you create. And what most people do is they create what's called a nonprofit corporation in their state. In Texas, it's called that. California, it's called that. Nevada, I believe it's called that. So you're creating that nonprofit corporation, and then you're filing for a federal exemption on top of it. Want to quickly hit this and finish this, and we're going to hand it over to Kevin to talk a little bit more about some best practices. But you know, every state that I've found generally has a group, an organization that loves to help people set up 501c3s, and they'll give you a bunch of sample docs. They'll answer your questions if you call them. Just Google it, and Google sort of forming a nonprofit, and then whatever your state is, and you're going to find them. All of this said, there is a little blurb of legalese that you have to include in your articles of incorporation. Everything else you can screw up. Everything else you can fix later. This is the one thing you need to remember. And what you're going to need to do is Google IRS publication 557. And at the very last page of it, they've got that information. And you're just going to need to tuck it in to your articles of incorporation. Everything else, form documents are fine. This is the one thing that you need to remember to do. So those are the basics. Those are the minimums. Hopefully, looking at this and hearing this, you're thinking, okay, well, some of this is new, but you know, it's all online. It's all designed to be done very, very quickly. I think I can try it. What I want to do now is to sort of make the case and get Kevin to help me do this, that it's worth putting some additional time in thinking about, okay, well, it's easy to do this, but why do you want to do this? And why do you and your friends and your camp want to do this? So Kevin, if you can talk to us a little bit about, you know, how to maybe do this right when you think about your mission statement or what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, thanks, Sandor. ID's a great example for this because we're a 10-year-old camp, and we were just recently in 2019 filed to become a 501c3. And why did we do that? And how did we view it? We really treated it as an opportunity. we saw our mission to be more and more aligned with environmental causes. We listened to our camp and the partners around it, wanting to contribute more in a year-round way. So those camps that are here and that you're participating in and you're aware of, or friends that are running camps, if you're looking to a way to become something more than a week or two at Burning Man, and you want to become a larger community, that this can be a pathway to do that. We were up until 2019, we were seven years of a camp. We had grown into community year round. We wanted to do so much more in a year round basis. And so we filed for a 501c3 and incorporated. And what we realized is it was a really great opportunity to think deeply about our mission and our vision and our values and how would we really identify ourselves. We were a little bit different because we're a larger camp, and so we exceed that $100,000 threshold, and so we had to do a full 1023 form 1023. And what that meant was we had to tell the IRS, here are the things that we're doing, and here's our mission and our vision and our activities that we're going to do. It was an interesting process to say we couldn't just say we're a Burning Man camp. We had to say what do we really want to achieve with our community and our organization? What are we going to do year round? And it was honestly a great process and a great opportunity, and it'll continue to be as we refresh it, to say, how do we define ourselves? Who are we? What do we want to do? What do we want to aspire to do? Where do we want to put our time and our energy? And so part of that was Burning Man. Part of that was our compost program, our workshops, our thought leadership, our knowledge, the things that we do in Black Rock City. And then what do we want to do outside of that? How do we want to reintegrate a lot of these efforts into the default world, and what impact do we want to have going forward? And so we thought really deeply about that, and that translated more to our mission and vision and values. So if you guys have always had that itch of wanting to do more, going through this process can really be beneficial, and it can really be an opportunity to think about what activities do I want to do? And so we added a lot of artistic elements and organizational elements, and we're continuing to think about what more we can do. So honestly, it wasn't just a net benefit financially and for liability and risk reasons. It was a benefit to our community to really, for one, sit down and say, what do we want to define ourselves as? And what do we really want to put out as goals and aspire to do? And the byproduct of all of that, I think you can tell as Sandor's walked through this, he's incredibly organized. And a lot of the organization that we do as camps is by force and not choice. This is also another great way to get organized with yourself and with camp. And once you go through this process, you can't help but be more organized than you were.
Thank you, Kevin. It's fun. I mean, I treat it as a hobby. I love free stuff, and the world's greatest source of free stuff I've ever found are 501c3s. And the fact that I can do that in service of my community and in service of Burning Man and in service of the people that I love and care about, it's amazing. And every year I discover another couple of new nooks and crannies that 501c3s can do something cool in. I will tell you just a very brief story that maybe give you the sense of what you can do with these. I mean, when I first started burning, the RC for our area that I live in, she was a very sweet, very kind person. She basically took on all the finances for everything the community was doing. And this was at the time there was a 100-person camp, and there was a warehouse, and there were all these efforts. And she was running it through her personal bank account, and it was a big number, and she'd been doing it for years. And if God forbid she had gotten audited, and thankfully she didn't, but if she had gotten audited, there was a real risk that she was going to have to pay enough money that it would pretty seriously impact her financially. And, do the sort of stuff that you hear about on the radio when people are like, do you owe the IRS money? That it was going to turn her into one of those people. So we were thankfully able to put something in place where the warehouse was in the name of this nonprofit. And, we had tools in the warehouse, and we had big, scary tools. And one of the people in our community cut his thumb off not too long ago with a table saw. And if that had happened in the warehouse, that would have been, potentially an issue for her if it had been in her name. The truck, we're sending a big Penske back and forth to Burning Man. And, those trucks sometimes, bump into stuff. We had a truck kind of back into a car coming back a few years ago. And if, God forbid something had happened where that truck got flipped or somebody got hurt and it's rented in this person's name, then that's a problem. We have a regional that's in the name of this nonprofit. And, just like Burning Man, occasionally, things happen at these regionals. People die, people get really hurt. And if that had been in this person's name, it's tough. And I will tell you that we've tried really, really hard over the years to find insurance. And insurance, particularly if you're just a person trying to insure some of this stuff, is really, really hard to get. And the second you say to them, Burning Man, God forbid, or the second you say to them, fire, or, hey, we got a bunch of people that are, imbibing at our event, they run for the exits. And it's very, very difficult. A lot of regionals cannot get insurance. There's a really tough environment out there for getting insurance for burning stuff. And thankfully, I'm going to preview this in a second. We're going to talk about some ideas that our resident insurance expert Muse has and some leads to get insurance. But the 501c3, it all fits together, right? So if you start thinking about, gosh, well, what does my community want to be? What can we do? And then every time that you do something, you're just really careful to put it in the name of your 501c3. What you're really doing is you're putting in the name of your community. And you're thinking about, okay, what does my community want? Not what I want. What are we going to do? You've got a board maybe of your friends and your fellow burners. And you're talking about, well, what's best for everybody? Maybe at some point you're thinking about succession, like Muse mentioned, where you're thinking about the next generation coming up and taking care of these things. And the numbers, when you start thinking about the span of years, 10 years, 5 years, I mean, the numbers really add up. And if you can save 8.25% on everything that you buy, that's really helpful. If you can avoid paying any kind of income tax, that's really helpful. A lot of these things that we talk about can make a big difference for your camp.
Yeah, I mean, it simplifies finances so much. We've all run into PayPal and Venmo limits. It simplifies those finances so much.
Yeah.
It allows for in-kind donations of actual physical things that people can construct, which motivates people to build a little bit more. But also it does change. It just absolutely changes the conversation, both internally as a community. It just gives you that different vibe, but also with partnerships and other partners. If you could talk to them about I just know the change of us with an environmental mission, being a nonprofit that's a community organization that does environmental things in addition to Burning Man. It changes the conversation completely when you're a nonprofit. It allows all these partnerships, all these opportunities to open up that you can't foresee. And we have partnerships and we have other things that are available to us that absolutely would not be like the possibility in the conversation would never have happened if we weren't a nonprofit. So it does change that vibe. And if you've ever, as a theme camp lead in the past, had wanted to do something but couldn't, or tried to start these conversations with partnerships and other entities, and it just didn't work out that way, I promise you it will change if you're a nonprofit.
Well, good. Well, let's come back into these slides. We'll finish these up, and then we'll dive into the meat of this, which is answering y'all's questions. So we talked a little bit about why you want to do this. We've talked a bit about how you do this. We want to talk a little bit about how you kind of keep it up, because this is a concern a lot of times from people as well. There's like, okay, well, I make the notebook, I do the filings, I do the things, but is this going to be a huge pain, every year? And what you see here are the things that you need to do to stay in the good graces of all these entities that you're reporting to. One, you need to have an annual meeting. And you're going to have a lot more meetings than an annual meeting, particularly if you're doing your camp. But at one point, you need to take some notes and say, we just had our annual meeting of our corporation. You're going to need to follow this postcard I talked about. So it's It's a tiny, tiny little piece of paper. It's about like this. I'm not kidding. It's a postcard that you file with the IRS online, and it just asks a couple of questions. Who are you? Are you less than 50K in revenue? Do you, one or two other things that are very just informational in nature, and you're done. I mean, it literally took me a minute, 2 minutes this year to file our taxes for our 501c3. If you get above 50K, there are different levels. And as you start to get bigger, you have a lot more forms that you need to fill out. That 50K and receipts and money coming in is kind of a very important toggle point. And if you get above that, it gets more complicated. But if you get to the point where you're bringing in $150,000, $200,000 into your nonprofit, then you've got enough money that it's not a big deal to go and maybe hire a CPA to fill out some forms for you. But your average camp is certainly not anywhere near those levels. And to have something like this where you can get all of these benefits, but have such a tiny amount of maintenance, it's fantastic. The other thing you need to do is you need to treat your corporation as a separate entity. I mean, it is a person in the eyes of the law. And so you need to not commingle your funds. Once you do all this work to set this up, still don't be running stuff for the corporation through your bank account. Keep notes, things along those lines. But these are things that you want to do anyway. You want to be writing stuff down when you're working with your camp and you're communicating with them. You want to sign documents on behalf of your corporation as yourself. So if you rent something, you're renting it as your corporation. I sign things, I'm like Sandor on behalf of Burner Network. I never sign things as Sandor anymore. And so, if something goes wrong, they go back to the corporation, they go back to me. You need to document your donations. So anything that's $250 or more, for them to get credit on their taxes, you need to give them a receipt. There are 1 million free templates online about donation receipts. Very simple and easy to fill out. The IRS requires you to stay out of politics. So you can't raise a bunch of money and then go give it to some politician for something. The IRS wants you to stay out of that. They want you to do stuff for the public good and not related to politics. You need to not pay your officers and directors non-market compensation or reimbursements. So it's a nonprofit. So keep it nonprofit and make sure nobody's profiting off of it. Seems pretty simple, but sometimes that can get confusing for people. And then the main thing you want to be doing is you want to be out there in the world doing good for the public. And that's what these are designed for. That's why the IRS has created all these incentives so that you'll do this. So that, hey, if you'll go and do some really cool stuff for the public, then we'll do these extra things for you. And that's kind of the quid pro quo. And again, we mentioned this earlier, the main thing is to treat this like a hobby and keep learning about it. And, there's all kinds of videos and stuff out there, and there's conferences, there's groups, there's other nonprofits in your town. There's all kinds of people you can connect with and learn from and benefit from. The last part of this, and I'm going to come back to Muse for this in just a second. There's extra credit here, and that's kind of circling back to the liability. The public at the top, you're the little burner at the bottom. There are 4 things that you can be doing to insulate yourself from, basically nuisance lawsuits. The first thing is these strong safety policies and procedures. If you can stay out of trouble by doing things the right way, being very safe about how you do stuff, that's by far the preferred way to do this. But if you do have something go wrong, let me turn it over to you, Muse. Maybe walk us through these other 3 items.
Yeah. So if you do have something go wrong, there are things that you could have done to protect yourself early on. So you can, as part of your camper contract with your camp itself, do a liability waiver, which is basically saying we're not going to be liable for any injuries you have while you are here. That's kind of a little bit of what you see on your Burning Man ticket. If you ever flip over the back and all that language, you have a risk of death. You could die here. You accept that risk of death, and you're going to be personally responsible and radically rely on yourself. But you can do that too within your own camp and create these liability waivers. You can do pre-accident releases, which releases you from any liability that you may have for any accident that someone has along the way. And then, of course, the way that's going to work is basically it prevents you from being liable to someone who's injured, even if it's because of your own negligence. And you can do that a lot of ways by having someone sign a document. You can also put out warning signs, really good, solid warning signs. If you're running an art car right by that door, slap up a warning sign that says, enter at your own risk, warning, dangerous, and just do that. And then you can reach indemnity agreements. And that's kind of the next level of this, which is, if is injured and they do something on your property and it's because of someone else, that someone else is going to be responsible, not your camp, just because that person happened to slip and fall at your camp, right? So maybe they're wearing a crazy costume that their best friend that has a basket hilt sword, and they fall on the sword and they cut their hands, and they just happen to do it while it's at your camp. This is, by the way, what happened to me today. And I got to come up with a better story for that, but it is true. I cut my hand on a basket hilt sword. But the person who, you don't want the camp where it happened to be responsible. What really happened is it's the owner of the basket hilt sword and how it was handled. And the truth be told, it was really me for taking safety third. So that's one of the great things that you can do. And of course, you can also look at different types of insurance. And Sandor, how much do you want me to go into insurance right now?
I've got another slide for you in just a second to hit insurance. So you might just hit it at a high level, the two types to think about.
Sure. Two basic types of insurance that you're looking at here. One is general liability, which is to protect you from anything that you do to injure anyone else. And the other is directors and officers liability, which is to protect you as an officer or director of your 501c3.
Yeah, and those are not easy to get, but thankfully we have an expert here who has some good leads for us, which we'll talk about in a moment. And then finally is sort of what you're talking about earlier, which is there's value in you not owning the asset yourself. So if there's a lawsuit and they include you in that lawsuit, you can get off of that lawsuit, can you not? It's a question for you, Muse.
Oh, I'm sorry. So the basic deal here is that if you have titled the asset, let's pretend it's your beautiful art car that's robot heart sailing down the road or whatever you're running. If it's titled in the 501c3's name, then it's only a problem with the 501c3. It's not your property. You individually, as the theme camp owner or the theme camp, that is the individual is not going to be responsible, right? So you're going to title it in that nonprofit's name. Everybody knows the nonprofit owns it, so to the extent that a nonprofit is a person at the law, and then you're not responsible for when that person falls off the back of your boat.
When you can still be sued, right? Everyone in America can be sued, but how do you handle it? I guess it's easier to get your name off that lawsuit if you are not an owner.
Right. So you're going to get off. Yeah. So, I mean, anybody can be sued, and that's just the reality of our system. It's very heavily protected in the American judicial system. So anybody can be sued, anybody can sue, but you're going to get out pretty quickly if you don't have any direct contacts to the property or the injury. So if it's not your property, if it's the corporation, you as the individual you're going to get dismissed from that suit fairly quickly. It will continue on against the corporation, right? Or maybe if it's the driver, potentially the driver of that vehicle.
Great, thank you. And I don't want to be remiss. I mean, we were talking about a lot of things you can do if you get sued, but I just want to keep coming back to the idea that the very best thing is not to get sued.
Yes.
And it's to be safe and to adopt a safety culture in all the things that you do, and not make safety third, but actually make safety first, and really think long and hard about how to keep people protected, so that this is more a sort of a backup than your frontline defense. Your frontline defense is doing things the right way and making sure that people stay safe. So let's go down. This is general liability insurance. This is the slide that you had put together, Muse. Maybe you can tell us a little bit about this, and then the names down at the bottom.
So, I think I saw a question in the chat about what kind of insurance is the best insurance for Burning Man? What should I get? And there are a lot of different kinds of insurance that you can get. Kind of the granddaddy of them all is something called GL, or general liability insurance. And that's a policy that can be written for the entire year if you wanted. So for example, Kevin, he's running Ideate. They're doing events throughout the year. You can buy a year's worth of insurance coverage to cover everything you do throughout the year as a 501c3. And what the coverage is going to include under a general liability typically is bodily injury and property damage liability. So if you hurt someone or hurt their property, that insurance is going, if your corporation does, that insurance is going to protect them, right? It's going to help pay their medical bills. It's going to cover any attorney's fees that get involved. It's going to repair their property. And if you're like us, Vines is, we serve alcohol. So we're going to be able to get post liquor liability insurance if somebody has, is overserved inadvertently. And we're very, very careful about this. So don't come to Vines thinking that you're going to get overserved. But if somebody's overserved or somebody drives a vehicle and there's, it comes all the way back to, I was sitting at Vines for the last 7 hours and had 4 bottles of wine. And then I went out and so-and-so let me drive their art car and I ran over the man. It would protect us against that. And that's really the granddaddy insurance. And you can buy that for a year, or you can buy it as what's called special event insurance, which is just for a day or just for a week. Or just for a month, for a very limited time. So, you have to look at what your camp is doing, what is the right time period and type for you. And so GL is really going to cover the most stuff. If you're going to rent a truck and you're going to drive stuff to the playa, and you're renting through somebody like Penske, that's great. They're going to afford you the ability to buy that insurance on the truck right then and there. I highly recommend that. If you have just bought that 3,000 truck that you saw on Burner Classics and it's your truck now, you want to get a commercial truck policy on it or a commercial auto policy on it. And you're going to have to in order to get it on the road, because you're going to have to be able to show an insurance card with it. Say you're taking $200,000 or $300,000 worth of sound equipment to the burn for that amazing sound camp. There is specific insurance that will cover your property if someone else damages it on the playa. And that's oddly enough called marine inland insurance. The reason for that is insurance actually was founded by people betting on the docks as to whether or not ships would actually make it to their destinations. And so people would bet on it, and that money would then be used if the ship sank. They would have to pay that money back. And if the ship didn't sink, they would have made all that money. But it's called inland marine. It's a really kind of a strange name for I'll protect your stereo equipment. And then, yeah, I think that's it. Those are the big ones: personal injury, commercial general liability, auto. And then on this slide, I've put on here some companies that I know will write this type of insurance for festivals and events. And so it is hard, right? When you go and you say to someone, hey, I just have this little theme camp and I want to get an insurance policy for my art car. It's pretty hard as an individual, but as an organization, as a 501c3, as a legally responsible entity, it's going to get a little bit easier for you. And so Markel Insurance, it's been around for a good long time. They write special event insurance. They're really pretty good about it. I added MFE in here because MFE will insure pyrotechnics. A lot of us have pyrotechnics. We don't, but I know a lot of you do. So there's someone to look at. And then I put down here the IIA. Every state has its own independent insurance agent network. And what that independent insurance agent, you can call them, they're brokers, and they will find someone who will insure you for you. And they know everything. So in Texas, it's the IIAT, Independent Insurance Agents of Texas. If I had talked to Markel and it didn't work out, they couldn't do it, I could call an IAAT agent or broker, and they would help me find the right carrier for me. So, and the pricing on this really depends on how big the risk is, right? Like you can literally say you're doing an event and you're doing a fundraising party and it's just a one-night fundraiser and you need to be able to show a certificate of liability insurance to rent that place for the night to run your fundraiser. That might only be $250, right? But the more complicated and the bigger the risk, the more they're going to charge you.
Well, and it's important to realize that there are a lot of fly-by-night companies out there in the insurance space, especially for events. Event Helper is one that I think a lot of people have seen before, where you get $1 million of coverage for like $50. If it's too good to be true, a lot of times it is. And if you actually have a claim, there's going to be some language in there that you missed that's going to result in you not getting paid or taken care of. And so this is an area where it's helpful to do look to professionals. We talk a lot in this breakout thus far on 501c creation to do stuff on your own. Looking for insurance, this is one where it is helpful to go to a broker, and it's helpful to get some professional advice to sort through which of these companies are useful or not useful. And that price is just going to be rolled into the insurance that you pay. The brokers that I've used for different things, they might tack on an extra $100, an extra $200 in premium to help you sort of navigate that. And to actually have insurance that actually works and isn't just garbage, it can be worth that.
Yeah, I'm going to give you a quick tip when you go look for insurance, and that is ask them what their rating is. And you want to look for a carrier that's A rated or better. And A sounds like, well, I'm perfect. It's A plus, A double plus, A triple plus. If somebody tells you they've got a C or even a B rating, that's a little bit dangerous. So just ask the question, what's your rating? And if it's not at least an A, keep moving.
And correct me if I'm wrong, that's the AM Best rating, is that correct?
That is the AM Best rating. Standard & Poor's does one as well, but most of us go by the AM Best rating.
Got it. Well, so process check, I'm going to go forward one slide here. This is the end of the slides that we have for you, but we're going to hang out until the top of the hour answering. I see a lot of questions in chat. We're going to get through as many of those as we can. If we miss one of your questions or you want more help, or you're like, this sounds great, but I'm lost, email campsupport@burningman.org, and we're going to hook you up with someone who can help you sort this. I'll help as many people as I can. We've got other mentors in the Camp Support Network that will help you sort through this. My strong interest in proposing this panel and wanting to see it happen is these things, once you get into them, are really very, very easy to do. And you get some very sophisticated protection that your average burner and your average camp are not getting. That's just there waiting on the ground for them to go pick up. And that's what I would love to see happen, is that more of our camps that are out there in the burnerverse just take these few extra steps. It seems like a lot at first, but if you'll take the plunge, you'll find it's not that hard and it's not that expensive. And more than likely, you're never going to have any problems. But if you do have problems, it becomes some other conversation other than I'm going to bankrupt myself here. And that would be just something that would break my heart. And I don't want to see it to happen to anybody. And I have heard and watched it happen to people. Christina hasn't been to Burning Man in a while because of these lawsuits and because it was the individuals that got sued. And we love that art car. And it's very hurtful that car hasn't been out there. At least to me, I love seeing it out there. And if we can do some things and get some knowledge out in the community to help nip that stuff in the bud, would love to do it. So D-Rex, if we can turn it over to you, if you can tee up some questions for us, we'll answer them as best we can.
All right, now Pan's asking, do you know if Burning Man storage allow those units to be owned by an LLC or a 501c3? Like they usually have to be registered to an individual.
Yes, I will tell you that Burning Man documents are typically form documents, and they don't always allow for those things. I knew someone that did an art honoraria where it was not designed for it to be not a person, but they will work with you. And as part of Camp Support, we are starting a transportation and storage working group. And then it turns out the answer is they're not set up to do that. We're going to fix that. And so if you try to go and do that as an organization and you get told no, email campsupport@burningman.org. And that just became my mission for the next 3 months, is to make that happen for you. What's the next question, Daisy?
Okay, Charles said, will you share the presentation in the 9 steps with individuals?
We absolutely will. If you want copies of the slides, just email camp support, ask for them. These videos are going to be made available to everybody, so you'll be able to see the video. I think it's going to end up certainly on Burning Man's YouTube channel. And then I think, of course, we have to have a volunteer go and actually edit all these videos. It takes a little bit of time. But once that happens, I think they're going to send out an email to everyone who registered. And just it's link after link after link for all the stuff. And you can just fast forward to the part that you want, pause it, and there will be the 9 steps right there.
All right, a question from Buck. If you already have an LLC, how do you convert it to a 501c3?
So let me take this one, then I'm going to toss it over to the panelists. I will tell you that you don't want to do that. In general, an LLC is not really well designed to get you through the 501c3 process. The IRS is a little tricky about what sorts of entities they want to be 501c3s. Technically, you are allowed to do it. In Texas, you pay $300 for an LLC, so it's not cheap to start one of those. But I would tell you, bite the bullet, pay $25 in Texas or $35 or whatever it is, wherever you are, and go ahead and create that nonprofit corporation. It's going to make getting through the IRS and getting that approval smooth sailing. And look, the IRS is a mess right now. They're still trying to process 2020 returns, and you're already going to be waiting months to get this. Don't do something that's kind of off the beaten path a bit that might delay that, because you want to get this as soon as you can. And so I would strongly recommend you not try to do that you spend the $25 and create a nonprofit corporation.
But the question is, what if there's already an LLC?
Let me.
Yeah, go ahead. Muse.
Yeah, so that's actually fairly easy. Each and every state has its own conversion law. So you can actually take your existing corporation. It's a form that you're going to get from the state, whatever state you're in, and you can convert it first to a nonprofit corporation and then overlay your 501c3 on top of that. So just go to your state filing forms. It's just a conversion. It'll actually probably save you a lot of money in the long run.
Well, and so that's certainly an option to you. I am sort of a different opinion. If it's only $25 to start over and do it right, and you don't have to explain to the IRS why you converted, there's a conversion fee that you have to pay, which is basically the same as just starting a nonprofit corporation. It's also a very easy path just to create that new thing, and you can wind down the LLC. Kevin, you want to weigh in here?
Those are 2 great opinions.
T-Rex?
We started fresh. So I would say it would depend. The only other thing I can think of is if you have a lot of entities under the previous name, the one thing I can think of is, well, we don't want to change the name of our company. We don't want to change the name of it. It's actually not that big of a deal, changing the name of it.
No.
Like ours is not technically Ideate, it's Ideate Community. We go by Ideate. So the naming shouldn't be an issue in case that is. But if you have a lot of other assets, I don't know, do what's best for you and reach out to get support.
And Muse makes a really good point that I want to reiterate for folks is don't be afraid to screw this up, right? The state will bend over backwards to help you fix it, right? If you file the wrong type of entity, you want to convert it to something else, they'll do it. You want to change the name, they'll do it. You want to change the address, they'll do it. Whatever you want to do, generally they're very helpful. You might have to call someone, you might have to ask them a question, but they'll make it happen for you. Now,
that's a great point. We were late filing one of our first statement of information forms. And I was worried it was going to impact a lot of other things because it's like the second form you're supposed to do. And I forgot about it. And they fined us $50 and I ended up filing it. They said, thanks. And I filled out another form to waive the fee. And they said, waived, thanks. Not all the things that you would expect from the state of California government, a lot of forgiveness and waiving fees, but they did. So that is a good point. And there's always numbers you can call for these state organizations that want to talk to you about it. Again, you know, if I'm a for-profit corporation, I'm trying to call the state of California to try to get something fixed, completely different conversation than I'm calling as a nonprofit, and people are you know, tend to be very helpful.
Well, you know, a lot of these people that run this stuff in your state, they're elected officials, and states compete to get companies to headquarter themselves in their states. So they're generally very user-friendly, and they want to bend over backwards to help you. You might have to sit on hold for 20 minutes while you get to the right person, but they want to help. D-Rex?
I have a question from Jason, and he says, can I start and or run a 501c3 if I spend a substantial amount of my time in a foreign country like Mexico?
Sure. Let me take that one. We'll throw it over to Muse. So you have to sort of bifurcate your mind about you as a person and your 501c3. The 501c3 nonprofit that you're creating, that becomes a person under the law. And so what matters most is where are the activities of this person, right? So if I'm primarily in Texas, D-Rex and I, what we do is primarily in Texas. So we are based in Texas. D-Rex is, she's now holds a green card, but when we first started doing this, she was a Colombian national, and she was here on a student visa. So, you know, she wasn't necessarily someone that you could say is like a longtime native Texan, right? She's basically an international person that's helping out with this. And so, you know, if you are primarily, let's say you're in Mexico, and that's where you are mostly doing what you're doing, you want to check in Mexico what is available. You know, what does the Mexican government offer? Does Mexico have a 501c3? Like, I bet they do. And you just need to ask those questions. The one thing you have to keep in mind is if you are active in multiple states, right? So you're doing a bunch of stuff in Texas, and then you go do transact business in Nevada. So for my camp, if we were doing business in Nevada, so that we were taking in money particularly, or we were delivering services or something in Nevada, then we would register our nonprofit not only in Texas, but in Nevada. But since everything that we do is in Texas, we're just in Texas. And so you might have a situation where if you're international and you're in a state like South California or something similar, you'll have to think that through. It's tough to give you generalized advice without knowing your very specific circumstances, but those are just some highlights. Muse, what do you think?
Yeah, I would also remind you that, you know, you're talking about where you're doing your business, but as you pointed out, it's where the corporation does its business, where its principal place of business is. Also, it's not you, it's you and two of your best friends, right? Because it takes 3 people. So, you know, Vines is interesting. We are a camp that is 50%, fully 50% international. And when I say 50% international, I mean everywhere from Korea all the way to Italy, all the way to Australia. And so, you know, there is a huge component of our stuff that is not local to the state of Texas, where I also happen to be, or Nevada. And so we kind of deal with that a little bit too as we do our business. But remember, it's 3 people. It's where the corporation does its business. And that's what's important, not where you happen to be sitting at your computer today.
Thank you. D-Rex, what you got?
All right, Jay asked, do camp fees or fundraising auctions count as donations?
So another new concept, right? When you think about donations, you're really kind of concerned about, is it tax deductible, right? So, and the question I always get asked is, hey, can my dues be tax deductible? Because that would be really awesome. It would effectively make my dues cheaper for everybody. But there's a concept that you have to think of. And this is, the IRS is trying to incentivize you to do things for the public, right? That's why they make these donations possible. And what you have, the test that you have to do is, when I donate money, do I get anything in return? And so if you get something in return, it has a value. And the thing that's deductible is only the excess, right? So let's say that my dues are $300 and I put it into my camp, and $200 of it I get back in stuff, right? I get services, I get meals, I get access to a porto, I get access to a shade structure, I get this and this and this and that, right? And you have to spend a little bit of time and think through the dollar value of that. And there's some guidance from the IRS on how to do that. But let's say it's just clear that $100 is, you get nothing in return for that. That $100, yes, is deductible. The $200 that you get back in goods and services, that is not deductible. And the the donation receipts that you see a lot of times, you have to specify what value of this donation did you receive back in goods and services, and it's just that difference that makes the thing that you have to be mindful of. Muse, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, and I'm going to hit it from the other side, which is the fundraising events and your silent auctions and all of that kind of stuff. And that certainly can be tax deductible, or at least a portion of whatever you pay can be. But it's no different than going to that charity benefit gala where you pay $300 to get in the door. But your tax deductible portion of it, when they send you your tax deduction receipt, is only $250 because the rest of it went to pay for your meal. And then while you're there, you buy a $50 gift certificate to Chili's, but you pay $100 for it. $50 is taxable, the $50, the other is not.
And we're very clear with, I don't want to commingle those things and have dues and to have, so, you know, to have someone be confused or have some disagreement or some negativity there. So we're very clear, dues are dues, dues are fully spent before we get to playa, donations are donations. And the wording matters and the requests are definitely separate. So when we ask for dues, they're going to be spent and they're not tax deductible. We ask for donations, you know, they are. So we try not, we're not large enough nor sophisticated enough to play in that gray area yet, but I would imagine, you know, if at the more and more events we do and the more and more things that any camp would do throughout the year, I think you could do that.
Yeah, I mean, I think Vines is a classic, and I will, in fair disclosure to everyone, Vines is just now going through this process. But we're a wine camp. It takes a lot of money to bring wine to the playa and serve it 12 plus hours a day. And so we receive donations from a lot of different entities. And when they give us that wine as a gift to serve on playa, and we're very clear, we're not going to let you use it in your advertising. We're not going to hawk it. We're not going to, you know, push your brand. We're really, you know, we're not going to do any of that. But when they give it to us, that would be tax deductible. That's a true gift to the company or to the organization.
Yeah. And, you know, there's a bifurcation here. And you'll find this a lot when you spend time in this. There's what you absolutely have to do. And then there's what sort of makes sense to do. And what Kevin is describing, that's exactly what we've tried to do as well. And that just keep it simple. You know, people don't understand a lot of this stuff and it's confusing, and trying to explain to someone, hey, part of your dues is deductible, part of it's not. And it's just a lot easier to set your dues at a point where it covers the kind of the cost. And then you go separately and say, hey, you want to make a donation. And then that donation is 100% tax deductible because they're getting absolutely nothing in return for it. Anybody else want to comment? All right, great. D-Rex, what we got?
All right, Jay, I believe Muse already covered this, but I'm going to repeat the question just in case.
Okay.
He was asking of what kind of insurance she recommended for the burn, and how much does it typically cost?
Yep. Just to say it again, general liability is the granddaddy. It protects most everything. But if you're driving a car, you want commercial auto. And if you want to protect that $200,000 worth of sound equipment, you should get a marine inland policy. And again, the costs are going to vary. I mean, literally from simply $200, which I think is well worth it from a good company, to, you know, it could cost you $5,000 a year if you're a big company, a big camp that's running multiple events throughout the year. But is it worth it? Probably. You know, that safety is probably worth it to you.
Yeah. A good broker is going to sit down and understand your risk profile and help you sort through it. And ideally, go shop your situation to a number of different underwriters and help you get the best, especially because you're coming at them saying, look, I'm a nonprofit. I'm spending money we had to go raise. So can we be as efficient as possible given my risk profile? And that'll happen for you. And it'll, it's fantastic that Muse has given us some suggestions on places to go, but you should absolutely make those guys compete for your business.
Yeah. And I want to say this about insurance brokers. You want to go to an independent broker that can write with multiple different companies.
Yes.
So like if you try to go to, I'm going to use auto because everybody knows it. If you go to like a company like State Farm, they're what's called captive. They can only sell you State Farm insurance. You want to go to somebody who can shop your business to a lot of different companies and give you the best deal. You do not want to go to a captive agent for this type of risk. It's great for auto. I mean, State Farm, I'm not going to say anything bad about it. It's just there are different business models. But for something like Burning Man and Burning Man themes camps, there's so much variety in the risk. You need to be able to have someone take it to multiple different insurance companies to give you who's going to give you the best rate and the best coverage for your money. It's like shopping an interest rate for a house when you're going to buy a new house.
These are really great points. And it's important to build in time for this because this isn't fast. It takes weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks and weeks to cycle back and forth. And so if you were going to try and get insurance, say for this year, now it's not a bad time to be working on it. You definitely don't want to wait 2 weeks before you need to leave before you try and get this insurance.
And Muse, can you talk quickly about D&O insurance? I don't know if that was covered in what you said before.
Yeah, I mean, so I'm not a D&O specialist, I will tell you, but occasionally corporate officers and directors will get sued for the acts and the choices they make with regard to the corporation. So breaches of fiduciary duty. My law firm had a legal assistant who was stealing from us. We didn't realize it. The managing partner ended up having some problems because of it. We had directors and officers insurance. I was at a very, very large firm, by the way. So I want to clarify, this is not like a 2-man office. Directors and officers insurance came in to help protect the officers and directors of the corporations from inadvertent misconduct, breaches of fiduciary duty, the responsibilities to their camp. But remember, insurance is never going to cover intentional misconduct. That is an exclusion in every single policy of insurance. If you run over someone with your car and you do it on purpose, it is not covered and it is never going to be covered. And if you are the person stealing money from your corporation, you're never going to have protection. But who might have protection is the officer or director who wasn't aware you were doing it fast enough. And that's what it'll help with.
Yeah, I've purchased D&O insurance quite a few times, and what it's really nice for is you're an officer, or you're a director of a nonprofit, and you get sued for basically anything. The first thing you do is you pick up the phone and you call your D&O insurance, and you have a conversation that goes something like, "Well, did you do this on purpose, or did you know you were screwing this up?" And then you're like, "No." And they're like, "Okay, well, we're going to have our attorney call them and get to work on this for you," and it saves you having to deal with it. And what you're paying for is basically insurance and an attorney that the insurance hires to go and manage this for you. And I will say that it's not cheap. The other types of insurance that we're talking about tend to be cheaper than D&O insurance. And it's been a year or two since I've bought D&O insurance. And so I'm not super familiar with exactly where the pricing is, but it's a couple $1,000 for a year. And you have to think long and hard about, is that something that you want to do? That's the most stretch piece of all this insurance we've talked about. You kind of like to have it if you can afford it, but if not, that's something where, if you get sued, you can still go find another attorney and you can handle it, but something to think about.
Yeah, and so we're much larger. We're trying to do a lot bigger things off Playa. That's something that we've incorporated. I know we didn't touch on a little bit. I know we're almost out of time. We didn't touch on, how the makeup of the board and the number of board members that you need. It's definitely strategic. There's the difference between a nonprofit board and a for-profit board and how you look to those members. So that's probably kind of nonprofit 201. But for us, if any camps out there looking to do much larger things off Playa and to be more significant, we made the choice of D&O insurance for us because it does also help with recruitment and the people being comfortable and doing and putting a lot more time into the nonprofit as a board member, for larger reasons.
Well, that is, you're absolutely right. We are up against it. This is sort of our time. I would talk about this all day if we could. I love talking to Muse. I love talking to Kevin. And I'm definitely going to go visit both of you on Playa. And so I hope that if you're like-minded and you want to have these conversations, let's keep them going. Camp support at burningman.org is a great place to go to connect. And if you want some of these resources, let me know. You want help, we'll help you. We may at some point do a meetup of 501c3s on the Playa, something to kind of build this community. I want to really, just from the bottom of my heart, thank Muse, who's wounded, who came in to provide us with her expertise. Kevin, who is not wounded, but also we're still very thankful of for bringing what he knows from ID8 and California 501c3s. And then Daisy, who is our heroic chat mod, dealing with all these questions. Thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, and we'll see you on the Playa.
Don't forget to fill out the feedback form. I already passed the link into the chat. Thank you.
Yes, that helps us make this better next year. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.